Hello, my name is Richard Squires and I'm the owner of LifeStory. I love writing people's memoirs. I love talking to people and I love telling their stories. Writing is a great way to communicate about how you feel, about yourself, about your family, and what better time to do that than now? As I say, every life is a story. Let me write yours. Or maybe in your case, you write yours. What's been on my mind lately is the question of what it would be like to be a teenager today, especially during this pandemic. If you're a teenager, how is this pandemic affecting you? How has your life been impacted? Are you journaling about it? Today I want to share with you one of the many amazing stories of my client Paul, whose memoir I wrote about 4 years ago. Paul's teenage years were unique and they were nothing like my teenage years. As a teenager in high school, my life had not been affected by a pandemic like we have now, or even by 9/11. What I was doing was playing soccer. I was hanging out with my friends and playing guitar. I was taking my girlfriend to dinner, none of which you can do now. And I have younger children, and it's not easy for them either. Paul was a Holocaust survivor. He grew up in the city of Lodz, Poland, and he had a happy early childhood and a loving family. But one day when he was 14, everything changed. As a young teenager, Paul watched the Nazis march down the main boulevard of his city. He told me they marched in with their trucks, their motorcycles, their machine guns, and their swastikas. Then there was no more school, because the Nazis had moved into Paul's school building and made it their headquarters. Paul remembered this like it was yesterday. Suddenly there was a curfew. Paul and his family could not be outside after 7 p.m. Right now we're all under curfew. And I can't imagine what it would be like to be a teenager today under curfew, because the only curfew I ever knew was the one my parents gave me. Paul's story has something in common with what we're all living through now. It's the new normal. Not what you would have expected life to be. Adapting to this new life cannot be easy, and it wasn't for Paul either. Soon after freedom was restricted for all the Jews of Lodz, they were moved into the Jewish ghetto, a neighborhood in which they were all quarantined, surrounded by barbed wire fence, and by the presence of the Nazis and their machine guns. Paul was required to work a variety of manual and non-manual jobs. He was beaten. He was interrogated and thrown into jail. His father died of malnutrition. And there was no school, and there was never enough to eat for anybody. And if you think that life couldn't get any worse for Paul, in 1944, everything changed. The ghetto closed, everyone was forced to move out. But if you were too weak, if you were too young, if you were too old, then you just didn't make it. Paul and his mother and his 2 sisters and his cousin were put on a train and they were sent to Auschwitz. The moment they arrived at Auschwitz, Paul's cousin and mother were separated from them, and sadly, he never saw them again. Paul worked in 5 or 6 different concentration camps. When I was that age, as a teenager, my jobs were a soccer referee, and I worked at the town pool snack bar. Paul's jobs were shoveling coal and cement. He was loading stones into buckets, and he was digging tunnels into the mountain. My life was very different than his. He was 19 when the Holocaust ended. He soon thereafter emigrated to the United States, where he fell in love, got married, eventually had 3 children, grandchildren. Paul built himself a successful business as a furniture maker. There were so many stories and challenges from the Holocaust, and it's so important that we continue to tell them. They need to live on so that we never forget. It's up to us and the future generations to share these stories. Today, we're all going through our own struggles. During this pandemic, when we have a silent enemy, and we're not sure when it's going to end, we realize it's the essential things that we really appreciate. Having enough food, being alive, and our loved ones. But today, we have technology to help us get through. Could you imagine not having TV, or computers, or our phones to help us communicate with our loved ones? That would be frightening. Something else relatable is this idea that giving back comes full circle. There was one occasion where Paul was on a train, and he was beside a stranger that he didn't know, who did not seem to be doing very well. He was not in good condition. Paul happened to have some bread hidden away, tucked under his shirt, so Paul decided he was going to share some of this bread. And it really... Something else relatable. is this idea that giving comes back full circle. There was one occasion where Paul was on a train, and beside him was a stranger who did not appear to be doing very well. Well, Paul had some bread hidden away in his shirt, which he shared with the stranger. A couple weeks later, at a different camp, Paul ran into the stranger, and the stranger worked in the kitchen. So at the end of each workday, Paul would go visit this man, and the man would give him a full cup of coffee, and he would fill the coffee halfway with sugar, which gave Paul the extra sustenance he needed to survive. This is a great time to write your story about yourself, about your parents, about your grandparents. Writing is therapeutic. Reach out to me. Let's talk about how I can write a legacy that your family will cherish for generations to come. My email is richard@lifestorymemoir.com. I'd love to hear from you. Life Story. Every life is a story. Let me write yours. Thank you.